Right. So, what we have discussed in the last session about what are the different types of data analysis, like prescriptive type, right? So predictive, right? So that part we have discussed in the previous session. And today I'm going to discuss about what is the difference, what is an advantage we see in data analysis, because whenever we want to implement data analysis for any of the projects, what are the advantages we see in this? Normally, data analysis, as I told you, this is all something will be used to have a better decision making, because whenever we are working on the project, it always important for us to have a better decision making. So on that regard, generally this data analysis is being used, right? So because we need to have a concrete decision over what is that we are implementing, etc., all that. So when it comes to the data analysis part itself is concerned, the advantages are as follows. The advantage is that one, we need to have a better and fast decision making, because fast decision making is what something which we have to be focused more on, right? So because there will be a situation we come across where we have to address people and make decisions sometimes faster, depends on the business need, etc. So hence it is always important for us to take decisions and all everything much faster. Okay, so faster business decision making. So based on the facts and evidences, what we have identified is what something which possible with data analysis. This is one advantage, right? So when we are implementing data analysis, faster business decision making is what something which we have to be seen with. This is one advantage. Whereas the second advantage is to know about the kind of performance issues, which is detection for action making. Because if there is any performance issues which we have identified, because when we are working on the projects, when we are working on the organization level, understanding the performance is also one of the key and prominent element we have to be focused more on. So when there is any performance issues, what is that we have seen so far? We have to make sure that whatever the decisions we are taking must be implemented, and at the same time we have to see how the performance of an individual activity or a group of activities or a business activity or a business decision must be right enough. Next, there is an advantage where we can have a deeper understanding over the customer requirements. Customer requirements, customer expectations, perceptions, demands, all these are different, right? It will not be the same all the time, okay? Because customer requirements will be something different in all the levels. Requirements will be different requirements we can see in reference to the customer requirements is concerned. So we must be having a deeper understanding over the customer requirements. This is also one of the key element we have to be focused more on, right? So deeper understanding of customer requirements is what something we have to see, right? So this is also one of the key element under implementation as far as data analysis is concerned, because we must be knowing about what customer wants. Especially this is something useful when we are working on the retailing sector, right? Retailing or e-commerce kind of, because time to time, situation to situation, customer requirements will change. So how you are going to address the customer requirements and how are we managing all the requirements is one of the key and prominent element we have to be focused more on. So it is always evident and important for us to understand the requirements on a detailed note, so that whatever the business decision makings we are taking and all everything might be much easier, right? So this is also one of the important advantage we see in data analysis. So we need to have a deeper understanding over the customer requirements. This is also one thing we have to be taken care of. Next, potential risk awareness and prevention, right? So because when we are taking any decision in the organization level, or we are implementing any processor systems, etc., in the organization level, there must be a potential risk which is involved in it, right? So whatever the risk was involved in it, and how to address this risk and how to minimize the risk is what something we have to be seen, right? So risk can be of anything, right? It can be budget level risk, it can be, right? So because sometimes budget is one kind of risk you can see over here, right? So there will be a limited budget when we want to implement something or when we want to expand our business. For example, if you want to expand the business and all, there may be a risk which is involved in reference to the budget part, right? So you may have a limited budget. Within the limited budget, we have to expand our services. That's what generally we have to do. In regard to that, we must understand what is the potential risk which is involved in it, okay? In reference to the budget part I'm talking about. Next was technical risk, right? So what technology are we implementing in? So to what extent technology we have implemented? All these things has to be taken care of. This is where generally potential risk awareness is what it is, right? So what kind of risk which is involved in it? At the same time, we must be knowing about how to prevent that, right? Potential risk awareness, prevention. So whatever risk which is involved in it and how to prevent this risk, how to make use of it, right? So risk awareness, right? So how to prevent this, it can be technical risk, budget related stuff. Next, it can be an operational risk as well, because whatever the risk predominantly involved in implementing the operations, right? So operations means activities we are working on the project. There are possibilities sometimes operational difficulties might be taken place. So which has to be addressed for sure. This is where generally operational risk come into picture. So when it comes to the risk part itself is concerned, operational effectiveness increases the organizational performance. So when organizational performance increased within the limited timelines, it always impacts on the uh, profitability and as well as success of the organization in short as well as in the long run. So we should identify what is the potential risk which is involved in it. And we must be aware of the risk which is involved in it and how to prevent, etc. This is also one of the key core and as well as element we have to be focused. Next, understanding about the business financial performance, right? It's understanding. This is where generally data analyst people will be interacting with the financial analyst team, because this is where there is some thing which you have to understand. Let me open the document. I'll write down here, it's better. Yeah, here, if you can see, when it comes to this point, right? So I'm addressing this point to you, right? So I'm addressing the financial performance understanding and all. In this regard, normally being into data analysis, we require to interact financial analyst team to know the performance of the organization, to know the financial performance, to know the financial performance, right? So this is where generally financial performance come into picture. So if you want to know about the financial performance of the organization, so being a business analyst, we must be knowing about so why and what kind of financial performance the organization has, right? So financial analyst and all. So this is where generally not being a BA, but not being a data analyst, but financial analysts do that. But being a data analyst, whatever the required data and all everything is, we have to provide. So data analyst will provide in this regard, I'm saying, okay? Data analyst will provide required data relating to the financial statements which are useful to evaluate the performance, okay, by the business analyst team, by the financial analyst team. Okay, because this is where generally the financial statements and all everything are required. Is what something the data, right? So this is also understanding and as well as providing financial statements is also part of data analyst team to provide the data I'm talking about, okay, not to do analysis, because analysis will be done by the financial analyst team, right? So they takes care of all that, right? So they takes care of all that, right? So whatever the required this thing and all, right? So that they'll be taking care of all that, right? So financial analyst team will take care of all that. So how to do financial statement analysis, all that. But whatever the required financial statements, that support is what something we have to give. Now here is a question anyone can ask me, like, Raj, what must be the financial data, right? In reference to the performance to evaluate. So what usually the financial data they have to provide? The financial data, what is that they have to provide will be as follows. The first one, balance sheets. Okay. First one is balance sheets. You know about the balance sheets because balance sheets means these are all something which we call it as data. Okay. Data or data. This is also one of the data, right? Balance sheet. In reference to the financial performance I'm talking about. One is about the balance sheets, like because balance sheets will evaluate you about the assets and liabilities. What are assets involved in it? And what are the liabilities, right? So either it can be fixed assets, it can be fixed liability. It can be fixed assets, it can be current assets, it can be short-term and as well as long-term liabilities, right? All these things are comes under the balance sheets part. That is point number one. Second, whatever the required profit and loss accounts. Okay, so whatever the required profit and loss accounts is also one of the key element we have to see, right? So what are the profit and loss accounts we have, right? So because profit and loss accounts clearly evaluate uh, the profit, net profit, gross profit, etc. Right? So this is all something relating to profit and loss accounts. So these are the two major financial statements. Data analyst team in reference to the data has to be given to the financial analyst team, because they have to evaluate the performance using different techniques. Of course, they use techniques that is not something required for a data analyst to know that. Right? So because that is something different, right? That's not something to do with data analyst, but there are some techniques. Let me explain you. This is not something you do, but maybe somewhere other day these are all will be useful to you, right? So there are different techniques like comparison statements. Right? So comparison statements. These are all the techniques. Okay. Next, common size. Next, ratio analysis. Okay. So all these are different techniques which normally we use this. Okay, these are all the techniques we use: comparison statement, common size, ratio analysis. These are all the different techniques which financial analyst team will consider to evaluate the performance of the balance sheets, profit and loss accounts, all that. Comparison statements means comparing two financial statements of the financial year, right? Accounting financial year, I can say. Either it can be of the present year comparing with the previous year, etc. This is all comparison is. So that common size means there will be a base year will be taken. With that base year, whatever the remaining year financial statements will be compared. That's what generally common size statements. When it comes to the ratio analysis, of course, there are different ratios like gross profit, net profit, capital gearing ratios, stock performance ratios, etc. All that, right? These are all the techniques, of course, which financial analyst team do. But whatever the required data in the form of financial statements, balance sheets, profit and loss accounts, all these will be provided by the data analyst team in this regard, right? So this is where generally this is one of the advantage, right? So that we must be knowing about business financial performance understanding. So for that, whatever the required data we are needed to provide is what something will be taken in this. So what is the required data is this. Whatever the required data I told you, that's what generally the required data, which normally we will be taking into an account, right? So this is where generally required data come into picture, right? So this is also one of the advantage you can see. Next, cost reduction and profit increase. This is also an advantage under data analysis. Now, in what way cost reduction and profit increase will be useful? Cost reduction means reducing the cost, whatever the cost which is involving in terms of the investment or in terms of the operational expenses, whatever we have. This is all something we call it as cost reduction, right? So where that we have to be controlled it. At the same time, when there is a cost reduction, automatically profit will also increase because there are two ways. Either increase the profit irrespective of the cost which is involved in it, or else through reducing the cost or the expenses and all also we can increase the profit, right? Because if you are controlling the expenses, automatically profit will also increase, right? Percentage will increase. So the second one is what something which is possible with data analyst or data analysis. That's what generally data analysts do. The data analysis is relating to that sort. So because they have to reduce the cost reduction is what something which they have to do. Equally followed by this, whatever the required profit to be increased. So all these things will be done by data analysts by using these data analysis on that. So these are the advantages we see when we are working on data analysis, right? So it is something useful to take faster business decision makings and all based on the facts, right? So this is not something based on the illusions and assumptions, right? So based on the facts and evidences, whatever the required data is available with us. This is one thing which normally we do. Second, about performance issue in reference to the performances, whatever are we working on, right? So performance issue detection for action making, right? So whatever the performances are we going to use on it, all right? So this is all something which is something essentially important. This is also one of the key and prominent element we have to be focused more on, performance issues that we have to be taken care of. Next, we must be having a deeper understanding of customer requirements that even I told you. So we need to have a clear understanding over what customer requirements we have, etc., all that. Next, potential risk awareness, right? So what is the potential risk which is involved, which increases the complexity of the business? So that we will be knowing about this prior, whatever the necessary preventive measures to be taken. will be implemented by us in regular intervals is what something relating to this. Next, it also increases the business financial performance understanding, because as I told you, for that, generally there will be a financial analyst team who will be taking care of financial performances, etc., all that. So for that, we need to have a clear understanding over the financial performance, where whatever the required data to be provided, everything will be taken care of by us. This is where generally business or financial performance understanding is what something we must be knowing. Next, one about cost reduction and profit increase, right? So this is also because if you know the facts of the data, what we have taken and what we have analyzed so far, we will be knowing about the kind of flaws which, what are the flaws and all everything we will be knowing, right? So we know about the flaws, etc., all that. So based on the flaws, what we have identified and all, so that necessary measures to be taken to reduce the cost. At the same time, whatever the profit which is to be increased and all everything are the advantages under data analysis. So when we are working on data analysis, being a data analyst, from the organizational level perspective, so I'm not mentioning this and confining this to any one organization. This can be for any organization, right? So this is not something confining to one organization. It can be for anything, okay? Because any organization, it coming to the fact, right? So majorly data analysis jobs, data analysis is required. I'm not 100% saying only this or these domains, but majorly you can see one is on healthcare side, right? So main requirements are more for data analysis for healthcare, because healthcare data, understanding the healthcare data, right? Providing decisions according to that, right? This is all something happens when you are working on the healthcare projects, right? So when they are working for healthcare domains, healthcare data, it's always important for us to know about what is the data we have taken and how to evaluate, right? So a complete 100% accurate analysis on the data is something required, especially in the healthcare domain, not in other domains, not majorly. When I'm comparing, I'm saying, I don't say that there will be no data analysis there in other domains, but data is more prevailed in the healthcare sector, right? So customer data, patient data will be there. At the same time, whatever the treatment they have given, whatever the recent changes happens in the healthcare reformations and all that data will be there. Even if there is any claim happens, right? So for example, some patient has undergone the treatment. So once undergone the treatment, if there is some claim which was raised, right? So claim raised and all, against to the claims raising of claims, we have to, this payer company, because insurance companies, I mean to say, right? Either it can be Blue Cross Blue Shield, Athena Healthcare, right? So all that, right? So different healthcare organizations, insurance companies are there. These Molina Health, right? So different healthcare companies like Priority Health, all that. These are the healthcare providers will receive the claim request which was raised by the provider. Subsequently, they do the claim adjudication and finally claim payment will be made. So major requirements in the major analysis of data, what is that we have to do majorly in the healthcare sector? This is point number one. One of the sector, I mean to say that, right? So one is healthcare sector is one. Second is retailing sector. Retailing sector, because the examples we have taken earlier, right? So in reference to the retailing operations like point of sale system, which was taken earlier by me, right? As a case study I have taken. So this is also one of the key area, right? So because retailing sector is also one of the key and prominent element we have to be seen with, because a lot of customer data involved in it. People who comes to the shop and buying it. At the same time, a lot of inventory is involved in it, right? So a lot of inventory is involved in it. So we have to maintain stock, right? Stock management is what something we have to do. So whatever the required stock management and all everything is what something we have to be performed with. So even stock data will also be involved in it, right? So whatever the required data to be managed, right? So all these things also will be involved, right? So all that. Next, e-commerce, right? So because online shopping kind of different products will be sold across online, right? So by the customer, right? So again, at the same time, when it comes to the data part itself is concerned, there will be an effective supply chain process where manufacturer will send the data. Okay. This is all something comes under that category. This is all something relating to that stuff. So e-commerce, retailing, e-commerce, healthcare. At the same time, banking and financial services. That is also one of the domain. Because banking domain majorly required due to the reason behind that was banking domain majorly the kind of customer data what we have, right? So how are we managing the customer data? This is all something comes under the banking perspective. It's not only about the banking perspective, data perspective in reference to the banking, but it is also required for us to have a knowledge over the insurance side, right? What are the different insurance products which customers are sending on? So there are a lot of these are the few domains I'm saying. Of course, everywhere it is required, but major needs when we are applying or whenever we get an opportunity, major domains were these, right? So one is healthcare side, e-commerce, retailing, even banking, insurance, right? So these are the domains which majorly decision making is something accurate, which is essentially required because dynamic changes happens in the industry as well as in the market, which must be identified, which must be addressed within no time. That is all something end of the day is important here. Right? So how are we addressing it and how are we addressing and how are we streamlining all this is something essentially required. In that regard, if you see in that note, on that note, so data analysis or data analyst roles or data analysis need of data analysis is something essentially required. So these are the advantages you see in context to the job of a data analyst and all. Now this is where generally data analysis process is. In this data analysis process, there are different stages. I'm just going to explain you on a high level note, not the detailed one. Detailed one I'm going to explain tomorrow. So because as you are the new entrants, the first thing, because anyone, right, any new entrant will have a doubt, right? So how this data analysis process functions, because how the data analysis happens in any, because irrespective of data, irrespective of the domain I'm talking about, irrespective of data and domain, how the data analysis process happens is what something we need to know. So answer is this. This is what generally the data analysis process steps. Write down the steps, please. Write down the steps because these are the steps that are involved in it. First, we need to define the question carefully. Point number one. Write down it. Please make a note. First point, define the question carefully. Second, we need to establish measuring priorities. This detailed part I'll explain tomorrow. Okay, I'm explaining only on the high level note. Second, establishing and measuring priorities. This is the second one. Being into data analysis, whenever we do, what process will it be involved? Okay, that's what I'm explaining in this presentation. Okay, so how do we do that? What are the step procedures? Defining question carefully. This is the first one. Second, establishing and measuring priorities, which is the second one. Third one, we have to collect all relevant data. Third one it is. Collect relevant data. This is the third one. Collect relevant data. This is the third one. Next, Once we have collected the relevant data, because relevant data means whatever the required data, because this is where generally structured and unstructured come into picture. Structured the data, unstructured the data, because this is where generally this SQL come into picture, because structured query language we call it as. Because if you want to extract, because let's say for example there is some data in reference to the retailing organizations was stored in the database. Okay. Now you want to know, you want to take a decision on your business, so that you want to extract the data, because let's say in last 6 months, which which uh, which bath soap is sold most. For example, I'm just giving the rough figure. Okay. For example, being a business owner in the retail domain, retailing operations, you want to know in last 6 months how much quantity of bath soaps was sold so far. Next, in that, what are the brands was sold, right? You want to know that. For example, as far as your understanding over your business, you want to know that. So this is something very choosy. Okay, requirements are very choosy in this regard, right? So because when it comes to the requirements are very choosy in such a way. Requirements are very specific, I can say. Okay, because this is something between the duration, nothing to do with customers. It is to do with bath soaps. It is to do with uh, brand. Okay, these are the classifications. So how are we going to extract the data from the database? This is where generally SQL will come into picture. Structured query language, we call it as. Using SQL, what is that we do? How to extract the data, how to edit the data, how to update, insert, delete, right? So this sort of understanding is required. So in this regard, whenever we are working on the data, data can be of two. One is about structured data, second is an unstructured data. Structured data means structured data will be formalized in such a way, whatever is required and relevant and all, everything comes under the structured data part. But when it comes to the unstructured data, there is no set of procedure or there is no set of data which is required in the way of the form what is that we needed. Okay, this is where generally unstructured is all about. So hence it is always important for us to understand and collect relevant data, what is it is required and why is it needed and all. So that sort of information is what something we have to collect. This is where generally collecting relevant data is what something we have to know, right? This is also one thing which is part of data analysis process. Next, analyzing and gathering requirements, right? So if you want to analyze and gathering requirements, there are different steps which are involved in it, right? What are the different steps involved and all? Of course, that I'm going to explain tomorrow. Anyway, the detailed part of it. So how to analyze and gathering data is what something we have to be known with, right? So how you want to do the analysis part. So if you want to analyze the data and all, what are the tools and techniques are we going to do it? So before analysis, we have to gather the data, right? So gathering data is what something required. From where are we gathering? So what format of data we are gathering and how much quantity of data we are taking on. And if you want to analyze this data and all everything, whatever we have gathered so far, what are the different analysis techniques we are using, right? So our tools are we using, right? So for example, we must have a knowledge over SQL, right? So because if you want to manage the queries and all everything, there are list of queries are there in SQL, which you need to know, right? So SQL queries required. So SQL you need to know. One of the tool we use it. At the same time, Python. Python, as I mentioned you earlier, also repeating the same. Python is a kind of programming language majorly used when we are working on the data analysis projects. Because normally web related client server enterprise related applications and all, we use Java. Majorly we use Java. But when it comes to the data analysis related projects, which are relating to data, which is involving relating to the data, Python is what generally the programming language we use. Python is what something we use majorly to understand it. So Python advantage in either in Java or Python is that advantage is that these two are the open source applications. Because Python is also an open source. I think since last session I have shown you a Python editor I have shown you. So Python is also an open source thing. So working and having a knowledge over Python programming, at the same time SQL, these are the two major ones. Of course, there are lot many, right? Because some people may go for Excel also, because Excel we are doing for a very long time. Okay. Next, there is another programming language for especially for statistical tools. The kind of programming language we called R programming, right? If anybody is going for healthcare clinical reports and all, they use a tool called SPSS. SPSS. This is all something will be used for SPSS is a tool used in the data clinical reports. For that, generally SPSS is being used. So different tools are used in this when we want to analyze the data. Different tools we use. So majorly what is that we are learning is majorly two. One is SQL and second is Python. These are the two major ones which we are learning because these are the two prominent in the market, right? And even industry requirements also majorly lies. I say not only that, but majorly lies on having knowledge over SQL and Python are becoming mandatory when you are moving to data analysis professions and profiles and all. Having a knowledge over Python and SQL is essentially required. So that's all something we are learning. So of course, they're using those tools and all, how to analyze the data, gather the data and analyze the data. That's all we do in the next level. Last but not least, once we have analyzed and all, whatever the results we have identified so far, how to review and interpret, because interpretation is different, review is different. Review is for our understanding. Okay, review is for our understanding, review will do that. Interpreting means based on that, how you are interpreting the data, how you are interpreting the results. Okay, so you're interpreting the results, nothing but which leads to recommendations. So based on the interpretation of results we have made, recommendations come into picture. What is that you are recommending? Okay. Finally, because let's say, for example, as I taken an example of data analysis part in reference to the decision to be taken in the retail segment about the status of the products, etc., or to take a decision. So based on the interpretation of the results, based on the position, results, whatever we have received and identified so far. So on this interpretation of the results, what recommendations are you going to provide to the people, to the business decision-making people, is what something we will be doing. Okay. This is where generally data analysis process on a high level note is what something we must be knowing or we should know when we are working on the data analysis part. Is it clear to everyone?